Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's uLaw webinar. The topic for today's webinar is Law Office Matter Management. It has been accredited for 1 hour of professionalism CPD credits in the provinces of Ontario, British Columbia, and New Brunswick. And the topic title, once again, is Law Office Matter Management. Now, like every other uLaw webinar, today's webinar has, again, a specific agenda to cover. I'm going to take maybe the first 30 to 45 minutes to kind of walk you through and talk about the important components of file or matter management from a perspective of both a productive law office as well as from a perspective of compliance requirements that are set upon you by your individual jurisdictional law societies. Okay? We'll certainly talk about simple steps to create files, to keep a tab on the important steps that you have to take to progress that file. So whether that be disbursements, whether that be dockets, starting with, of course, the retainer or engagement letters that determine the style of docketing and dispersing and how you move that file forward, how you invoice your client, the important milestones at which you invoice your client, again, based on the engagement letter, coming down to whether there was trust or general transactions within that matter or file, and how those transactions need to be well documented and presented in certain styles of formats, such as the ledgers and journals. That's expected out of you from a law society standpoint. And last but not the least, we'll spend a little bit of time on additional parties, how that is an important component of a file with regards to the relations that different contacts have within a file, such as joint retainer, applicant respondent, landlord tenant, plaintiff defendant. So there could be different parties involved in a matter, and we'll take a quick stab at how best to manage those relationships well within the definition of a single file. Please feel free to use the chat window at all times to ask any specific questions that you may have with regards to today's webinar. And kindly do request you to mute your phone lines. This session is being recorded and will be available to you as early as Monday on our YouTube channel. Okay. So before we move forward with actually talking about the matter management, the file management, if you will, we'll take a quick snapshot, if you will, of the client intake process, what that really entails and why that is important and how it's a great predecessor to your matter or file management. So one of the first steps that we talk about when a client is looking to engage your law firm is the aspect of the client intake process where you as the law firm are now capturing important details regarding this client, whether that be a detailed recording of the actual consultation that you had with the client, or was a simple email or a web form that was filled out on your website that the client has filled out and you're now following up as a sales lead. Along that process of the client intake, you store the information. You first ensure, of course, if there is any conflict as far as you or your firm may understand, if there's any conflict at all in representing this client's legal interest or need. And once you've determined yea or nay, depending on your situation, you move forward, and that's when you move forward with creating a matter. And depending on the circumstance and the different type of matter that it may be and the situation of your client, it may lead to a progressive file where you're actually docketing, dispersing, retaining, and completing the matter, and even closing that matter with settlement accounts, or could have taken the route of certain reasons that have led to a non-engagement, either from your side or from the client's side. Either ways, there is a process. Either ways, there is a certain methodology that's recommended for best practices as a law firm to take and how best you manage the file information and the matter information. So, for example, if the client, for whatever reason, the matter did not move forward, you still want to be able to close that matter, generate a non-engagement letter so that you can quickly document that and email it or mail it to the client, setting straight that you as a law firm are no longer responsible for that particular matter or file that was discussed. Okay? And if it has moved forward with a engagement, that's when you really get down to the retainer letter or the engagement letter, depending on whether you have trust transactions or not, to proceed further with that matter. And let's assume you have proceeded further with that matter. There are certain important components, once again, that you keep in mind as you utilize any tools that is based on your convenience and your research, whether it's a manual system, whether it's an automated system, cloud-based system. There are many varieties right now that legal professionals have to consider. But the important essence that you still want to keep in mind is the aspects around organization of files and management. And when we talk about organization, making sure that the file numbers are unique, ensuring that these files can be quickly retrieved. You're not scampering for the file. You clearly understand all the other conflict scenarios that this matter would now apply to, ensuring that it's cross-indexed, right? So if it's a similar contact client name, it's important that your system of record allows you to retrieve this information saying, hey, you have worked with Andy in the past. Looks like you may have worked on a family matter for this client, or someone who sounds like Andy, for example, Andy Smith, right? So making sure that you have a good structure to organize your files when you first get started with your file or matter management, starting with having a unique way to earmark your file numbers. Then comes the aspect of whether within that matter, you as a law firm have a policy to apply around how you transact, whether it's a trust retainer scenario relationship, or whether you're just going to do a simple work and then get paid for it. It all comes down to your individual firm's policies, as I mentioned, sometimes depending on the area of practice, sometimes depending on the relationship of the client. Maybe it was referred by a close friend, so there's a bit of trust, and hence sometimes the trust is not involved. So that's a little bit of a pun for Friday afternoon. Moving forward after that, then you sign the retainer letter or an engagement letter, clearly defining milestones, responsibilities, the areas of practice that this particular letter or this relationship that you're forming constitutes for you to represent. It could be now coming down to the type of billability. So this could be a billable time. This could be a complete flat rate matter. It could be a good variety or a mixture of billable time and flat rate. This could be a pro bono matter. This could be a blocked fees with disbursement, without disbursement, with HST, without HST. So there's quite a few scenarios that you certainly want to keep in mind. Once again, having the right tools that can be flexible enough to accommodate all of those scenarios, right? Now that you've defined, documented, and now the next step is ensuring that your client clearly understands what they're signing up for with regards to this letter, ensuring that they sign it, and again, keeping in mind that yourself and everybody in your firm are well aware of the responsibilities that you have now agreed upon mutually through that retainer letter. Because you don't want an office personnel to randomly send an invoice which was never warranted for. You don't want an office personnel not to send the invoice at the appropriate time when it was warranted for to begin with. So both those scenarios need to be well avoided by making sure everyone's aware of the responsibilities within a file. And of course, there's importance around how you keep the status of that matter updated, whether it's a settlement statement that you send on a regular basis to your client, whether it's a bill of cost. There are many different documents that clearly articulate the story around a matter especially around the finances and how they've been dealt with. And it truly paints a very prudent and a professional picture around your firm if you can do this in a timely manner, because that is going to leave a very good impression upon that client, leading to, of course, the much needed referral or referring you as a really good law firm that can take care of their friends' matters too. Okay. And of course, when you consider a retainer letter, important to keep in mind that some important salient features are very well considered and documented, including the nature and scope of matter. We spoke recently about the responsibilities, the termination details. That becomes an important component of that matter management too, because we have heard of certain cases where a firm requires a certain top-up of a retainer at a certain milestone. Now, this could be a financial milestone. This could be a milestone of work accomplished or completed, and they're not going to move forward unless that retainer is received. And sometimes it may be a clause within that retainer agreement that says that if I do not receive that in a certain amount of time, then I do as a firm have the ability to non-engage you or terminate this particular relationship, right? And that dictates how you manage your matters too. So if your retainer has dropped below $500 and you have agreed that a top-up is warranted, and if it does not happen, then everyone in the firm who's dealing with that matter needs to appreciate and bring it to the attention of the individuals responsible to decide upon prudent next steps, including termination details, as long as that it's well defined and documented and signed between two parties through that retainer agreement. And that's why that's important. You can't add it after the fact. It's one of those things that you need to think about right up front. Okay. Now, we spoke about various types of scenarios that determine within a matter. So we'll start with disbursements. Of course, legal fees is a given. We spoke about block fees, flat rate, billable time, pro bono, mixed billing. The one area where we believe extra attention needs to be provided by law firms is around disbursements. Because disbursements, as you very well appreciate, hopefully you've been part of some of our webinars in the past, this is one gray area where we find law firms often tend to lose money if they're not doing the right process at the right time, especially if you're paying for it up front using your own business money or personal money, and you're not converting that into or relaying that information, as we say, to your client as agreed upon to recover that, because a disbursement is just a recoverable expense from your client. And there are various different types of disbursements that you should keep in mind to ensure that you do not lose your money. Of course, the Law Society has provided you this wonderful vehicle called a trust or retainer amount, either getting the amount upfront, including the disbursement, or just using the trust amount to pay for disbursement, depending on your law firm's need, is one way that you can avoid failure of payment from clients and the inability to recover that disbursement. So, for example, if it's a billable disbursement or, such as a court fee or an application fee, where you're pretty much going to recover expenses based on the actual charge itself, then it's a great idea to use the retainer account or the trust account to be able to pay for it right from your trust, because it was never your money to begin with. Easier to just pay it off right from trust so that you don't have to deal with bookkeeping, extra ledgers and journals, and also waiting for the payment, right? So just something to keep in mind as you engage with disbursements within a matter again. Now, let's say you have done the right thing of docketing, disbursing, invoicing on time, right? Making sure that you've entered all those transactions, There are certain documents that the Law Society would like for you to present, even when asked for, to of course tell a certain story around the key responsibilities that your firm should have taken throughout the life cycle of that client and matter management. So for example, when you did the client intake, ensuring that you did do a client ID verification, whether it's a driver's license or a passport, ensuring that you've verified that this individual or business is truly who they claim to be, making sure that you have your retainer letter signed and a retainer receipt signed by both parties so that there are no conflicts of interest later on around the amount that was paid. Ensuring that there was a conflict check done at the time of opening the file, and if there was a non-engagement, ensuring that that non-engagement letter was signed off as well. And any acknowledgement or receipt from the client would be greatly appreciated too. So not only does it end with you sending that non-retainer letter, you probably either through whatever form of communication request an acknowledgement from the client. So if it's an email, just take a print of that email, keep it as part of that file. Ensuring that the appropriate invoices have been delivered on time as per the milestones agreed. And if trust transfers were done after these invoices were generated, ensuring they're captured. If you do an electronic transfer, and if you're in the province of Ontario, for example, then making sure those jurisdictional documents, such as the Form 9A, are completed as well, part of that file. So Form 9A is whenever you transfer money from trust to general through an electronic means. Okay? And last but not the least, of course, depending on the situation of the file itself. If this is a file that does prolong for a period of time, depending on the nature of the matter, such as criminal matters and family matters, then ensuring, as agreed upon the retainer agreement, having certain timely updates that are sent to your client. If it's a corporate client, sometimes they may dictate that such updates are provided, whether that's biweekly or monthly. If it's a private client that you believe is going to go on for a certain period of time, then you can share your best practices of your firm through sending these quarterly or monthly updates with both statement of activities as well as your account documents, as I mentioned, whether it's a summary of your settlement statement, whether it's your bill of cost, or maybe it's both. It could be an update with trust and general ledgers, right? And in doing so, you're not only updating your client on a regular basis, but you're pretty much updating your own firm with regards to where you stand with that file as well. And also ensuring Law Society compliance, because now you look as a very professional firm representing the society. And of course, at the time of closing a matter, along with the final settlement statement, it's always recommended that you wrap it around a very professional closure letter, which once again puts a logical closure to your firm's responsibility around that matter moving forward. Either saying, the work's done, thank you very much for your business, we look forward to you referring us through any other platforms that you have, or it could be where, thank you very much, and from here on, I'm sure we both agree that the work that we originally agreed upon was done. There's no more work to be done. Right? Because you don't want to have that client come back to you saying that they still expected you to continue working on that file. Okay. And this is a slide many times we talk about in many of our presentations. And once again, stress upon the importance of that original retainer or engagement letter. Many law firms, especially when you're just getting started, of course, have certain simple templates that you may have taken off the web or taken from your colleagues. Important to keep in mind that you tweak it matter-to-matter basis, and over a period of time, of course, you will easily be able to templatize that depending on the area of practice that you show your strengths in. Very essential, though, to keep in mind that you have complete control over what was defined in that retainer or engagement letter, because that's exactly what you would have to do within the file or matter management, because that's what dictates the disbursements, the timing of the docketing, the timing of the invoicing, the kind of information that's in the invoice that can be crisp, clear, and straightforward to the client, ensuring that you're doing your trust transfers, that then allows you to reconcile your accounts properly. Also gives you the right picture around where your matter is. For example, if you've got $600 in trust transfer and it's pending and you haven't moved it yet, then that's going to reflect on that matter. And it's important that you do that trust transfer within that month end so that you can make that money in that month. Sending out the quarterly, yearly, and we discussed that, the updates as agreed upon. Closure letter, and as we near the year end of a not so great year, we still send out, the appropriate, I would say, holiday cards and holiday greetings for a better 2021. Right? Okay. So these are one aspects or a specific aspect of your business. This is everything to do with the financial touch points, transactions as agreed upon your retainer letter. Now there are some other touch points that you want to keep in mind when you're managing a file, depending again on the nature of the file itself. If this was a traffic ticket, then you're not probably going to have too many parties involved. But if this is a criminal matter, if this is a family matter, and if there are dependents and each dependent has his or her own representation, it's not necessarily more the merrier in this case. The more important it is to keep a tab on each of those different parties involved and the relationships they have with regards to the client that you're representing in the file. I'm sorry for making these long English statements, but sometimes it takes that statement to define it right. So one of the things to certainly keep in mind is grouping the types of contacts that your firm comes across, and then associating those individuals or contacts within a firm, particular matter or file for twofold. One, ease of filling your court forms, because certain court forms such as family, accident benefits, could be even your small claims, these court forms do ask you for that information. Do ask you for who is the plaintiff, who is the defendant. If there are multiple plaintiffs, then you have to add an additional side page to that, right? It's called additional parties. I think it's a 1A form for SEC. And the second reason why you want to do that is to strengthen your conflict searches. So now if you've associated Andy Smith as a defendant in a matter against Boris Becker, for example, the next time there's a Andy Johansson who walks into your firm and you search up Andy and you do a client search, or conflict search rather, then you need a way to show you that there was an Andy who was a defendant as a party involved in a previous matter. Not saying that there's a relationship between Andy Smith and Andy Johansson, but there could be. And sometimes there are. Maybe they are related. That might sometimes lead to a conflict, so it's important that that information is stored. And that's an important aspect of matter management as well, for you to keep in mind. Okay? Because once you have that relationship well set, it's easier on your conflict searches to give you a complete picture on the conflict possibilities. Now, like anything else in your legal business, and business ownership, it's important to keep, once again, a tab on important metrics that define the matter analytics that your system is telling you, your system record is telling you. And this is important to maintain a good hygiene of your business, especially if it's a small business, small, medium business, cash flow, and the importance of ensuring the payments are paid on time, the importance of doing your trust transfers done on time is highly relevant. And you need the right tools at the right time to tell you the actions that you and your colleagues have to take to make sure that the cash flow is close to where it should be. You're doing everything that you can to ensure that you're able to recoup the revenue for your firm if you stay in business. You have an appreciation for the disbursements, and those, if there are any disbursements that have not yet been recovered, then you need the right analytics that tell you that, so that now you can follow up or talk to the appropriate lawyer within your firm to ensure that they generate the invoice to recover that disbursement. Right? You could have cases where people are just paying for disbursement but are not necessarily reporting it right away as an invoice. So these analytics are simple trigger points that give you a better insight in not only to the different milestones that a matter entails, but also reflects the financial stability and hygiene. So that automatically reflects in the overall legal business's financial capabilities. Also reflects rightly into the reconciliation process that then also once again falls into the profit and loss of that particular month. So it is not just a single point, but it does have a cascading effect on multiple different touch points with a legal firm. And that is why it's important to keep that in mind. If you're working not out of trust, and if you're primarily doing all the work up front and then waiting for client payment, then law firms today are starting to see that they reduce the net payment terms. It's not net 60 or net 45 anymore. Sometimes it's net 30, net 15, depending on the area of practice. Matter analytics also tells you what areas of practice are you making a lot of money in, especially if you're a law firm that specializes in multiple areas of practice. You know, maybe your firm has the right expertise to represent family, or real estate, maybe criminal, small claims. Ensuring that you have the right data captured within that file or matter should be able to give you the insight around where are you spending your time and money? Where are you spending a lot of expenses in? What's the typical aging for these types of matters? What's the ratio between the actual legal fees and your expense? Are you doing a lot of pro bono when it comes to family matter? So maybe initially these are questions that aren't truly intriguing, but as time passes and as you grow to be a more mature firm that's looking to improvise every year, then you certainly need the support of the data that you're capturing and the information that we're able to provide you, or the firm or the system of record is being able to provide you, so that you can now make meaningful business decisions, next steps, based on the information that you're being presented. Right? So if you're doing a lot of pro bono in a certain area of practice, maybe you'll be cautious and plan for it the next year around. So not only are financial analytics, where's your revenue, what's your expense, important, there are certain micro data that's available right within your matter that grow to be the larger accounting ledgers and journals that your firm and your bookkeeper and accountants would mostly look at. So if you can, without micromanaging, at least keep a tab on the micro data around these matters, that's going to truly help you make very smart decisions about your business. With matter management is also importantly financial management, because you make your revenue out of how best you docket, disperse, and manage and move that file forward in a law firm. One of the areas, once again, a gray area is the lack of the right tools or a process or a discipline sometimes around docketing on time. Of course, post-COVID, some of the amount of travel may have reduced significantly, but we're hoping that it catches up to whatever may be the new norm of legal professionals once again being able to go to court, travel, all of us included, be able to be human again and be that social animal. But there was a time, I think, when this one slide was done, and it's surely the case in the future too, where legal professionals invariably become busy, especially if they're traveling. And there's a need for you to capture the moment as and when it happens. So today, software products, including uLawPractice and others in the industry, provide you as a legal professional the ability to use your mobile phone through app, whether it's iOS, Android, to be able to capture dockets wherever you may be. With the advent of technology and the use of the internet, you are now able to capture the moment right away. So the opportunity for excuses are unfortunately reducing, but then once you pretty much learn the lay of the land, and once you get that discipline in, then that's just going to help you benefit from being a more productive business. Mobile technology within matter management is now taking it kind of really to the next level, where now you're able to understand the status of a matter right away in the fingertips. You don't even have to open your laptop. There used to be a time where you had to be in the office to access this information in a specific device or machine. Then it moved on to you having the freedom of having access to information on your laptop or any internet-connected device. Now as we move forward, it's come down to the type of device that you have this information in. And legal tech is catching up. And the right tools provide you with the right strategies to capture information, review information in the comfort of your phone. The ability to docket as you're on the go. Technologies to even capture phone conversations and prompt them to be entered as dockets, because you don't want to miss that moment. That 15-minute conversation could be a billable time for that particular matter. Docketing email conversations and chats that originate on your mobile device. Understanding client information. So if you're on the phone with the client and you really quickly want to check what's the typical day of sale on this client. Let's say it's a corporate client, a repeat customer, and you're retained, and you quickly want to understand what the day of sale is, which means how often do they pay you your invoice in time? If it's a net 30, do they pay you in 35 days? Do they pay you in 25 days? What's the average days of sale? An important data component that you may be interested in. As well as understanding other financial and billing details specific to a matter. Once again, you may have a single client that has a certain style financially and paying you on time and things of that nature, coming down to the nature of the business as well. Because that also comes down to the amount of money that was involved, the type of work that you did, the amount of dockets that you had to enter, certain files may need a lot of docketing and dispersing for not so much of a return in money value. Whereas certain types of areas of practice, you may just have one or two dockets, but those are really high value dockets because of the nature of the business itself. So all of this are important aspects of matter management, and it's no more an afterthought. It's almost become your differentiating factor as a law firm to be able to use all of this data and strategize this as part of your billing, your structuring how you charge your client. And this is what's led to a lot of flat rate matters today, because people can understand that there's a fixed fee, there's no surprises, and they just want to repeat that success many more times to make the revenue. These are just some examples of the opportunities that you have with mobile technology in today's day and context. That was just a quick snapshot of a iOS platform app of uLaw that gives you all of those capabilities that were just listed. And we always have this particular slide in many of our presentations, and it's not so much selling the uLaw platform, it's more so selling the concept around legal accounting. There are other software products out in the market that you should research and, of course, make a decision for yourself. But when you're in that research mode, do weigh in the factors around legal accounting software, because you are a legal firm, a law firm, and there are certain nuances to how you manage finances and the transactions and how accounting is done around those transactions, the type of documentation that's required around those transactions, right? The invoice can remain to be the same, but the information that's in the invoice sometimes really matters to how you represent what was agreed upon in your retainer letter. So when it comes to legal accounting, of course, to any software for that matter, you certainly want to start off with really understanding total cost of ownership. Is this cloud-based? Is this PC-based? How much more of my investment needs to go into the software or this particular tool that's going to help me through this process? How much more efficient is this truly going to help me in my practice, right? Do I need this product and then I need to spend a lot of time and money and effort in using this product? Do I need a lot of external support to help me with using this product? What is the compliance nature of the particular tool that I'm using? Because that's yet another obligation that you have as a legal firm, to be able to respond to all of your audit requirements around the individual law society jurisdictions, right? And of course, the aspect of freedom, the ability for you to do whatever tasks that you can do wherever you may be. I'm sure you've heard this term of anywhere, anytime, with almost anything in business these days, right? And that's a possibility, and it's no rocket science, but that's a possibility based on the advent of tech to begin with internet and all of the protocols that are used to manage applications and data transfers over the internet. And it has most definitely intrigued the needs of legal tech, because now a lot of the business processes that go around the legal firms have been automated and have facilitated on the cloud through this practice anywhere concept. Okay, so with another 15 minutes left in my overall webinar, I'm going to use the uLawPractice product once again as a way of showcasing to you what an example of a legal accounting software can help you with around how you manage your matters, the important steps that there are during that process, and things that you should keep in mind, and how a tool can enable you and empower you to have a checklist, ensuring, again, you're able to make your money on time, you're compliant, and you're making the right decisions for your business. Please feel free to ask any questions, because I want to quickly pause before I move on. If there are any specific aspects of today's topic that you want me to cover or haven't touched upon, hopefully I haven't put everyone to sleep the last 40 minutes. I hate monologues, but hopefully from next year onwards, uLaw, we hope to have interesting webinar opportunities where it could be a two-way street. We could see each other, and I could, maybe run a poll, surveys, things of that nature. But for now, you're stuck with me just talking like a radio host. But I'll pause briefly to see if there's any questions that I can take before I actually move on to my demo. Okay, so continuing along, I have with me here a fixed-use uLaw user, Mr. Roger Moore. And as discussed, we'll probably do the quick client intake process. So let's assume that there's this client who's just walked in or just called me for a legal matter. And let me go ahead and create that client. So I'll say add new contact, and I'm going to say to my clients group. And I'll say there's Daniel Smith, who was referred to me by a current client. I'll quickly take a correspondence address. And a phone number. And this is the phone number that can be used when you use the uLaw app, for example, to directly dial, have the conversation, and then docket the conversation into that matter. So now you've done a client intake. The next step really, of course, is to do client ID verification, get in their driver's license, do a quick conflict search when they're on the phone right there. So let me go ahead and let's say we do a simple search. If you're just getting started, you pretty much know your clients by first name, but sometimes it's just as easy as search just for name. But if you've been in business for a while, then you really want to have a thorough check. Have you ever come across a Daniel Smith in a different matter? Have there been a party in a different matter? So those are the types of detailed conflict checks that you then may have to do. For purposes of time, let me move forward, and I will create a file. I'm going to assume that there was no conflict, or I was able to address what the conflict was. I'm going to go ahead and create a file by clicking on the Matter button. All right. So this is where you're able to capture first and foremost the area of practice by personalizing this based on your firm's need. And let me just say that, again, a will and estate, preparing a will. And of course, you sign off a retainer or an engagement letter as part of that really kickstart of that matter management. So you could choose any of the templates that we provide. Bring in your own templates if you like. I'm just going to say it's a flat rate retainer that I'm signing for $500. Okay. So maybe I take a retainer up front, $565, get a check, provide them a receipt. So now you've got a signed retainer letter, you've got a retainer receipt for $565, and then you move forward with the docketing. So here's the conflict screening. You can see there's quite a few Smithsonians. You can quickly either connect with a cloud-based document management system. I'm going to be connecting with my Google Drive, or this could be OneDrive. This could be a local computer. Of course, with the local computer, you don't get the flexibility of viewing that information right within the cloud product. But let me quickly walk you through that as well. So sometimes the questions that we often get asked are, what about all the documents that we just generate? What do we do with that? So you can go ahead and store copies of them. So here's the conflict screening report. Here's, let's say we've signed that retainer document. We have that. Here's a signed retainer letter. Okay, so now if I refresh, I'm going to have all those documents right within the context of the matter. If I click on the retainer receipt, there it is, available to you at any time. Okay. Now let's move forward with the docketing itself. So I'm going to just, for purpose of time, once again, keep this simple. I'll say was preparation. Do this initial phone discussion, email conversations. Sign and uploaded into customer drive. Okay, of course, I'm just making this up as I'm going. Now, some important data points is the total amount of time that you spent in doing this work, and of course, you have the flexibility of converting this into a flat rate. So assuming Roger Moore here is the lawyer in the province of Ontario, he's going to be charging taxes, and hence it's $500 plus taxes. Now, if the retainer agreement or the engagement letter says that you would invoice right away, then that's what you have to do, right? But then if you haven't done it, of course, from a matter management perspective, you need that insight. And you need to know, what are you missing out? So a work in progress gives you that opportunity to tell you that Mr. Roger Moore, you were doing this work for Ms. Danielle Smith, 25th, and there's a unbilled flat fee amount of $500. Or if this was for a different matter of unbilled hours, then this, of course, helps your firm to stay on top of it. Let's say you do that over the weekend, you come back on Monday, and you're ready to invoice. You can do a quick pre-bill so that either yourself or your staff could send you this, or you can send this to the client, have them verify it. And if everything looks good, Wrong matter. Let me go ahead and generate the actual invoice here. I'm going to say invoice complete. Keep the preview. Again, once again, a professional way of doing this is marking this as paid if you like. Sending yourself a little snippet of this information so that any eligible or trust transfers are caught right away. And when you send this invoice to your client, you can just email this. Okay. And now that this invoice has been sent, then the final step is basically to accept that client payment. But in this case, because you had the trust transfer, you can just do the transfer right away. Clearly tells you that's 565. So this particular item is called the trust invoice payment transfer. So let me go ahead and do that. So let's say I did a trust to general. I could have just written myself a check. Or if I did an electronic fund transfer, then again, filling out a Form 9A. Having every information readily available. Now you complete this matter, so you can basically just send them a closure letter. And if they ask for, you can always send them the settlement statement or the statement of activity along with that. So progressively, as and when you're documenting all of this information, you can even store this on the cloud, so it's all available to you in a chronological manner. And of course, send this to the client, or you can upload it on a Google Drive portal to your client so that's accessible to them in a secure channel. So here's every document that we've generated for this client. Conflict screening, the retainer letter signed, retainer receipt, the first invoice, the Form 9A for that transfer, the file matter closing document, and the settlement statement. So if you can do this chronologically with every matter, then you're pretty much going to save yourself a lot of headache when time comes to audit, right? So here's a quick settlement statement that tells you the professional services rendered, right? How was that paid? Was there any retainer involved? And if they do ask you for a ledger or a journal for your trust account specific to this client, you can very easily generate that as well. There you go. You have 565 in, and then through this invoice 3284, you did that trust transfer. Same thing goes for general ledger too. Now that you've accepted that payment, all for the specific matter. So this is ledgers and journals specific to this matter. But if you're looking for the ledger in general for your entire firm, then of course, then you would open that up right within the accounts. And here is your general ledger. You had a legal fee, and then that was paid through an electronic fund transfer. Okay? Now you're ready to actually close this matter and move on to your next. Now, if you had complete audit readiness, you can, of course, have a lot more documents that you can work on in this particular matter. So let's say this is actually a different type of matter if additional parties are involved. If there's a joint retainer, then the wills and estate would have been done in both their names. This is an LATB matter. If this client was the landlord, you could have done the LATB work by, let's say, add a tenant here. So the next time you search for a Boris, when you do a conflict search, you're going to see Boris is actually a tenant within a Daniel Smith matter as well. Of course, you can generate, in the province of Ontario only for now, generate these Word documents as well as court documents, rather, for all types of LATB forms where we pre-populate the information already provided. So here's your landlord, Daniel, and here is the tenant, Boris. Of course, if that's a document, you can readily store it right within the context of this file. And some of the other different compliance documents is client ID verification document is really telling the law society what piece of information did you capture from the client up front to ensure that this is truly the client, the name and all that information. So you can see I got their driver's license. Okay. So you have all of the information that you need right within the compliance panel of the matter. That, once again, allows you to be very complete, thorough, financially stable, very much on track based on the retainer letter signed up, and most importantly, have the peace of mind around important piece of information around matter analytics, giving you the opportunity to even print all of the information, deliver insights around that matter. So right now you know this is an invoiced matter. There's one invoice in it. That's the total invoice, total paid. There's zero balance. Okay? So hopefully once again that this webinar is yet another way of reiterating the important aspects of matter management to you as a law firm or legal firm owner, the important steps that you take to create a file, the important steps that you take to engage with the client, the docketing, dispersing, and the invoicing that you do based on that letter, and the important law society documents that are required for you to manage and maintain as part of your compliance. So with that, I'll wrap today's webinar for this Friday afternoon. And thanks everyone for joining us in this webinar. I'll open the session up for any questions that you may have, more specific to today's webinar. Thank you. Okay, if there aren't any more questions, well, once again, thank you very much for joining me and look forward to seeing you in our next webinar next Friday. Thank you, everyone. Take care.